My name is Camden, a 34-year-old single dad raising my son Mason alone since my wife walked out 4 years ago. Last month, I spent 3 weeks planning Mason's 10th birthday party. His first double digits, a superhero bash he'd been dreaming about for months. I personally called every family member, sent handmade invitations. The day arrived and we stood in that decorated room for 3 hours. Nobody came, not a single relative. Mason's eyes when he asked, "What's wrong with me?" Dad gutted me. Then a week later, Mom texted not to apologize but with a demand that shattered what little faith I had left. Hey folks, before I dive deeper into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family disappointment, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of people who understand what it's like to rebuild after betrayal. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I was always the invisible middle child in my family. My mother, Patricia, made it clear from early on that my sister Amanda was the golden child destined for greatness while I was just two there. Our modest 2-story house in Elmwood Park became the stage for countless examples of my mother's blatant favoritism. When Amanda got straight, as we'd go out for dinner at her favorite restaurant. When I achieved the same, I'd get a quick good job before the conversation returned to Amanda's latest accomplishment. My father, Thomas, was the buffer between my mother's cold indifference and my growing sense of inadequacy. He wasn't perfect, but he made sure to catch my baseball games and helped with science projects, creating pockets of normalcy in our dysfunctional family dynamic. But when I was 15, Dad suffered a massive heart attack while on a business trip to Detroit. He died alone in a hotel room, and our family was never the same. After Dad's death, Mom's favoritism toward Amanda became even more pronounced. The college fund Dad had been building for me mysteriously dwindled, redirected to Amanda's more promising future. I worked 2 jobs throughout high school, stocking shelves at the local grocery store and delivering newspapers at dawn just to save enough for community college. Meanwhile, Amanda attended an expensive private university, with all expenses covered. By the time I turned 18, I'd saved just enough to move out and enroll in the architectural design program at Illinois State. Those first months away from home were like learning to breathe again. No more walking on eggshells, no more being the perpetual disappointment. I threw myself into my studies, worked part-time at the campus bookstore, and slowly built a life separate from my family's toxicity. During my sophomore year, I met Alicia in a design theory class. She was brilliant, creative, and seemed to see something in me that even I couldn't recognize at the time. We became study partners, then friends, and eventually fell into a relationship that felt like coming home. She believed in my talent when I doubted myself, pushed me to apply for competitive internships, and celebrated every small victory as if it were monumental. After graduation, we both landed entry-level positions at different architectural firms in Chicago. We rented a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and mismatched furniture, but it was ours. I proposed to Alicia on the shores of Lake Michigan on a snowy December evening, having saved for 6 months to buy a modest diamond ring. She said yes before I even finished asking. During those early years of marriage, I made sporadic attempts to rebuild my relationship with my mother and sister. Each holiday gathering or occasional dinner left me emotionally drained, with Alicia whispering reassurances on the drive home. "They're missing out on knowing the incredible person you are," she'd say, squeezing my hand across the console. I believed her mostly. When Alicia told me she was pregnant, the joy was indescribable. I called my mother immediately, hoping this grandchild might finally bridge the chasm between us. Her response, "Oh, that's nice. Did Amanda tell you she got promoted to senior management?" I hung up and promised my unborn child they would never feel the sting of conditional love. Mason arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April, 7 pounds 6 ounces of pure perfection. Holding him in my arms, I made a silent vow to break the cycle of emotional neglect I'd grown up with. This tiny human would know without doubt that he was loved, valued, and enough exactly as he was. For the first few years, Alicia and I created the family environment I'd always yearned for. Our modest home was filled with laughter, encouragement, and genuine affection. I took countless photos documenting every milestone, determined that Mason would have tangible proof of a childhood filled with love. I continued inviting my mother and sister to important events: Mason's christening, his first birthday, preschool graduation. Sometimes they'd show up for 20 minutes, make a cursory appearance, and leave early. More often they'd cancel last minute or simply not respond. Each time I'd shield Mason from the disappointment, creating elaborate explanations for why Grandma and Aunt Amanda couldn't make it. When Mason was 6, our family dynamic shattered. Alicia grew increasingly distant, staying late at work, planning weekend trips with friends, creating any excuse to be away from home. When I finally confronted her, the truth emerged like a slow-motion collision I could see coming but couldn't prevent. "I feel trapped, Camden," she said, eyes fixed somewhere beyond my shoulder. "This isn't the life I pictured. I love Mason, but I'm not cut out for motherhood. I need something else." Within 3 months, she'd moved out, leaving behind most of her belongings and all of her responsibilities. The divorce was surprisingly straightforward. Alicia wanted out, completely agreeing to minimal visitation rights and modest child support that often arrived late. Mason asked for his mother constantly at first, his young mind unable to comprehend why she wouldn't come home. Eventually, the questions tapered off, replaced by a quiet acceptance that broke my heart more than the screaming ever did. In the 4 years since Alicia left, I've rebuilt our lives with careful intention. I transitioned to a work-from-home position at a smaller architectural firm, sacrificing career advancement for the flexibility to be there when Mason gets off the school bus. Our modest 3-bedroom ranch house isn't featured in design magazines, but it's warm, stable, and filled with evidence of Mason's evolving interests, currently superheroes and space exploration. Financially, we get by, though there's little room for luxuries. I've become an expert at stretching dollars, finding free community events, and creating special moments that don't require significant expense. Mason never complains, though I sometimes catch him looking wistfully at classmates' stories of Disney vacations or expensive gaming systems. School has been challenging for him socially. Quiet and thoughtful Mason doesn't naturally fit with the louder, more athletic boys in his grade. The absence of a mother comes up in unexpected ways: Mother's Day projects, family tree assignments, casual playground conversations. Each instance requires Mason to explain his different family structure, making him feel perpetually other. Despite everything, the bond between us is unshakable. Our evening routine includes reading together before bed, sharing 3 good things about our day, and worry time, 10 minutes, when Mason can voice any concern, no matter how small, knowing I'll listen without judgment. On weekends, we have adventure days, exploring forest preserves, local museums with free admission days, or neighborhood garage sales, hunting for treasures. This was our reality, imperfect, but ours, until Mason's 10th birthday changed everything. Mason started talking about his 10th birthday 6 months in advance. "Double digits is a big deal, Dad," he informed me solemnly one evening while we washed dishes together. "When you hit double digits, you're not really a little kid anymore." The significance wasn't lost on me. This past year had been particularly difficult for Mason at school. A group of boys had targeted him with the specific cruelty that only 4th-grade boys seem capable of, mocking his second-hand clothes, excluding him from playground games, making comments about his absent mother. The school's anti-bullying policies seemed perpetually ineffective against these more subtle forms of social rejection. Despite these challenges, Mason maintained a resilient optimism that sometimes left me in awe. "Maybe my birthday party will help," he suggested one evening. "If the kids from school come to an awesome party, they might want to be friends." The hope in his eyes was simultaneously heartbreaking and inspiring. I was determined to make this milestone birthday exceptional. My regular salary covered our basic needs with little left over, so I took on additional freelance design projects, staying up until 2 in the morning after Mason went to bed. For 3 months, I sacrificed sleep and any personal time to earn enough for the kind of celebration Mason deserved. Together, we chose a superhero theme, with particular emphasis on Spider-Man, Mason's current favorite. He's just a regular kid who tries to help people even when it's hard. Mason explained, unaware of how much I identified with Peter Parker's struggle to balance ordinary responsibilities with extraordinary challenges. I researched local venues, eventually booking the community center's activity room, reasonably priced but nice enough to impress both kids and adults. They had an attached playground and offered basic decoration packages, to which I added custom superhero elements ordered from small businesses on Etsy. The cake was my biggest splurge. I commissioned a local bakery to create a two-tier Spider-Man design with Mason's name and a special double digits message. The baker, Emily, seemed touched by my detailed explanation of why this birthday mattered so much, and added several fondant superhero emblems at no extra charge. For activities, I planned a superhero training camp with different stations, an obstacle course for agility training, a craft table for making superhero masks, and a super strength area with safe, silly strength challenges. I found inexpensive superhero capes online and ordered enough for every expected guest to take one home. Mason's role in the preparations became his after-school project. He spent hours crafting handmade invitations for his classmates, carefully writing each name in his best handwriting, adding stickers and drawings personalized to each recipient's interests. Watching him invest such care into invitations for children who had been unkind made my throat tight with emotion. For family invitations, I took a different approach. Experience had taught me that written invitations were too easily ignored, so I personally called each family member my mother, sister, 2 aunts, an uncle, and 3 cousins who lived within driving distance. I explained the significance of this birthday, emphasized how much their presence would mean to Mason, and received varying degrees of non-committal responses. "I'll have to check my schedule," my mother said, distracted. "Amanda and Richard are taking Rebecca college shopping that weekend, so I might be helping with that." "Mom, I'm giving you 6 weeks' notice," I said, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "This is really important to Mason." "Don't be dramatic, Camden," she replied with the dismissive tone I knew too well. "It's just a birthday. There will be others, but I'll try to stop by if I can." My sister was even less encouraging. "A kid's birthday party really isn't my thing," Amanda said, "and weekend time with Rebecca is precious now that she's finishing high school. But maybe we'll swing by for cake or something." Each conversation left me with a familiar hollow feeling, but I pushed aside my own disappointment to focus on Mason's excitement. "Grandma said she'll try to make it," I told him, hating the necessary omissions and softening of their indifference. As the party date approached, I sent reminder texts to both family and the parents of Mason's classmates. From the school parents, I received several polite regrets and about 8 tentative acceptances. From family, silence or vague messages that set my anxiety simmering. The day before the party, my friend Marcus came over to help transport decorations and supplies to the community center. Marcus had been my roommate in college and remained one of the few constants in my life. Divorced himself, and without children, he had become Uncle Marcus to Mason, showing up for school performances and baseball games when biological family did not. "You're going all out, man," Marcus commented, as we loaded bags of decorations into his SUV. "This looks amazing." "He deserves it," I said, simply checking my phone again for any family confirmations. Nothing. We spent 3 hours transforming the community center room into a superhero headquarters. Blue and red streamers created a web-like pattern across the ceiling. Posters of various superheroes adorned the walls with a special "Happy Birthday Mason" banner across the main wall. The craft table was meticulously organized with markers, glue glitter, and pre-cut mask templates. The obstacle course was assembled with tunnels, balance beams, and soft hurdles. Everything was perfect. That night I could barely sleep, alternating between excitement for Mason's joy and anxiety about attendance. Around 3 in the morning, I sent one final group text to my family, "Really hoping to see you all tomorrow. Starts at 2 p.m. Mason is so excited." Morning arrived with Mason bouncing into my room at 6:30, already dressed in his new Spider-Man t-shirt I'd been saving for the occasion. "It's today, Dad, I'm finally 10. His face was alight with anticipation. eyes bright with the uncomplicated joy children have before life teaches them to expect disappointment. Over breakfast, he talked non-stop about who might come, what games they'd play first, whether anyone would beat his time on the obstacle course. I nodded and smiled, pushing down the gnawing worry that grew with each hour that passed without family confirmations. "Do you think Mom will come?" he asked suddenly, the question catching me off guard. Alicia hadn't attended his birthday for the past 3 years, sending only a text message and sometimes a gift card. "I sent her an invitation," I said carefully. "But remember, she lives pretty far away now." Another necessary lie to protect him from the truth that Minneapolis was just a 6-hour drive to a distance easily managed for important occasions if Alicia had wanted to make the effort. Mason nodded, accepting this explanation as he had many others. "That's okay. Grandma and Aunt Amanda will be there. And Rebecca, I made her a special card because she's always nice to me." My heart constricted at his persistent faith in people who had consistently shown they didn't deserve it. I checked my phone one last time before we left for the venue. No new messages. "Ready for the best birthday ever?" I asked, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Mason grabbed his Spider-Man jacket and gave me a gap-toothed grin. "Ready." We arrived at the community center an hour early to add final touches and arrange the food. I'd ordered mini sandwiches cut into star shapes, fruit skewers, vegetable platters with dip, and various superhero-themed snacks. The cake had been delivered and looked even better than I'd expected, the Spider-Man design vibrant against the blue background. Mason circled the room multiple times, exclaiming over each decoration and activity station. "This is a Wesem, Dad," he kept saying, his excitement so pure it momentarily washed away my growing anxiety about attendance. As 1:30 approached, I stationed Mason by the door, ready to greet his guests. He stood tall in his Spider-Man shirt, practicing different welcomes under his breath. "Welcome to my superhero party, and thanks for coming to my birthday, and I'm so glad you're here." Each rehearsed greeting intensified the pressure in my chest. 2 o'clock came and went. No one arrived. "Maybe there's traffic," I suggested, checking my phone. No messages. Mason nodded, his position by the door unwavering. "It's okay. They'll be here soon." By 2:30, the room remained empty except for us and 2 community center staff members who had begun exchanging concerned glances. I sent another group text to my family. "Party started at 2. Mason is waiting to see you all." Mason had moved from the door to sitting at one of the decorated tables, legs swinging, still watching the entrance. His earlier chatter had faded into quiet vigilance. I tried calling my mother, straight to voicemail. My sister, same result. I approached one of the staff members, Kelly, and spoke quietly. "Looks like we might have a low turnout. How long can we stay?" Her eyes were sympathetic. "You've got the room until 5, no matter what. Take your time." She paused, then added, "My son had a party like this once. It gets better." The kindness from this stranger nearly undid my careful composure. 3 o'clock. One text from a classmate's mother: "Sorry, Charlie woke up with a fever. Hope Mason has a great birthday." I showed it to Mason, who nodded understandingly. "That's okay. Being sick on a birthday would be awful." I tried to engage Mason in the activities meant for groups. We ran the obstacle course, timing each other with exaggerated announcements like sportscasters. We made superhero masks, though Mason's enthusiasm had noticeably dimmed. We played the strength games, declaring each other champions of various made-up categories. Through it all, Mason kept glancing at the door. At 3:45, I noticed Mason was no longer beside me at the craft table. Scanning the room, I didn't see him anywhere. Mason, I called, trying to keep my voice light. No response. A quick check of the attached playground came up empty. Concern mounting, I headed toward the restrooms at the back of the community center. Outside the men's room, I heard the muffled sound of crying. I pushed the door open gently. "Mason, buddy, are you in here?" A stifled sniff came from the last stall. I walked over and knocked softly. "Hey, Spider-Man, Can I come in? The lock slid open, revealing Mason sitting on the closed toilet lid, his superhero mask crumpled in his hands, cheeks wet with tears. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes that held a question I wasn't sure how to answer. "What's wrong with me, Dad?" 5 simple words that shattered what remained of my heart. I knelt down, ignoring the bathroom floor, and took his small hands in mine. "Absolutely nothing is wrong with you, Mason. Nothing. You are amazing and kind and smart, and anyone who doesn't see that is missing out on knowing the best kid in the world." His lower lip trembled. "Then why didn't anyone come? Not even Grandma or Aunt Amanda?" He wiped his nose with his sleeve. "Did I do something bad?" I pulled him into a tight hug, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. "No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make really bad choices, and it has nothing to do with the awesome kids in their lives." We sat there on the bathroom floor for several minutes, Mason crying quietly while I held him, fighting back my own tears. Eventually his breathing steadied, and he pulled back to look at me. "Can we go home now? I don't want to be here anymore." I nodded, helping him to his feet. "Of course we can." When we returned to the party room, Kelly and the other staff member had begun quietly packing up the food. Kelly approached us with a gentle smile. "We boxed everything up for you to take home, and we put the cake in a special container." I thanked her, my voice rough with emotion. Mason stood beside me, shoulders slumped, the excited child from this morning nowhere to be seen. As we loaded the car with untouched party supplies, uneaten food, and unopened party favors, Mason carried his birthday cake carefully. The once exciting Spider-Man design now seemed to mock us with its cheerful colors and happy birthday message that no one had been present to sing. The drive home was filled with a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the windows. Mason stared out at passing neighborhoods, still clutching the small gift bag containing the presents I'd wrapped for him, items he'd mentioned wanting throughout the year that I'd carefully set aside money to purchase. My phone remained silent, no missed calls, no belated apologies, no explanations from family members who had once again proven where we ranked in their priorities. As we pulled into our driveway, Mason spoke for the first time since leaving the community center. "Dad, can we just pretend today wasn't my birthday? Maybe try again another day." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, taking a deep breath to steady my voice. "If that's what you want, buddy, that's what we'll do. But first, let's have some of that awesome cake. It's too good to waste." Mason gave me a small, sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Okay." We carried the remnants of the failed celebration into the house. I set the cake on the kitchen table and found a match to light the number 10 candle. "Make a wish," I said, softly. Mason closed his eyes for a long moment, then blew out the candle with a determination that squeezed my chest. "What did you wish for?" I asked, though I never usually did. He looked up at me, eyes serious beyond his years. "If I tell you, it won't come true, and I really, really need this one to come true, Dad." Later that night, after Mason had gone to bed, clutching the new Spider-Man action figure I'd given him, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of our day. Party supplies that would never be used. Food that would mostly go to waste, despite my best efforts to salvage it. A cake with only one small slice removed. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. No messages, no calls, no acknowledgements from any family member about missing the most important day of the year for my son. The rage I'd been suppressing for Mason's sake finally broke free. I threw my phone across the room, watching it bounce off the couch with a dull thud. Then, alone in the quiet house with my sleeping son upstairs, I put my head in my hands and wept. The day after the party disaster, I expected to wake up to at least one message from my family, perhaps a half-hearted excuse or belated birthday wish for Mason. The continued silence was its own kind of statement. Mason slept late, unusual for him, and when he finally came downstairs, he moved with a subdued quality that was painful to witness. The resilient bounce in his step had vanished overnight, replaced by a careful, quiet presence that reminded me too much of my own childhood adaptations to disappointment. "What would you like to do today?" I asked, trying to infuse normality into my voice. Mason shrugged, poking at his breakfast without interest. "Nothing really." I suggested a trip to the comic book store or the small local arcade, usually guaranteed excitement generators, but Mason declined, both with the same lifeless shrug. Eventually, he migrated to the couch and turned on cartoons, though I noticed he wasn't really watching, just staring in the general direction of the screen. That evening, I called my boss, Diane, explaining the situation as clinically as possible, requesting flexible hours for the upcoming week. "I need to be available when Mason gets home from school," I explained. "He's going through a tough time." Diane, a mother of 3 herself, immediately agreed. "Take whatever time you need, Camden. Your designs are always on deadline and you can work those hours whenever works for your family." The next day at work, my colleague Brenda noticed my distraction and invited me to lunch. We weren't particularly close, but she had always been kind, occasionally sharing stories about her teenage sons. Over sandwiches at a nearby deli, the whole story spilled out: the careful planning, the no-shows, Mason's heartbroken question in the bathroom. To my embarrassment, my voice cracked several times during the telling. Brenda listened without interruption, her expression shifting from surprise to anger on our behalf. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. "My youngest, Tyler, is in 5th grade at Oak Ridge Elementary," she said. "They have an excellent school counselor there, Dr. Mitchell. He helped Tyler through some tough bullying last year. Maybe he could talk with Mason." That afternoon, I called Dr. Mitchell's office and briefly explained our situation. He offered Mason an appointment for the following day, rearranging his schedule when he heard the urgency in my voice. Mason was initially reluctant. "I'm not a baby, Dad. I don't need to talk to a doctor about my feelings. Even Spider-Man needs help sometimes," I countered gently. "That's why he has the Avengers, right? Everyone needs backup, even superheroes, even dads." This logic seemed to reach him, and he agreed to one session just to try it. Dr. Mitchell turned out to be exactly what Mason needed: a calm, grandfatherly man who spoke to him with genuine respect rather than condescension. After their first session, Mason seemed marginally lighter, and he agreed to continue weekly appointments. Meanwhile, I made my own resolution. Sitting alone late one night after Mason was asleep, I wrote out a list of hard truths I could no longer ignore. 1. My family would never be the supportive network Mason deserved. 2. Continuing to expose him to their indifference was a form of harm. 3. We needed to create our own traditions and support system. 4. It was time to establish firm boundaries to protect us both. The next morning, I deleted my mother and sister from my phone contacts, removed them from social media, and began researching local family activities where Mason might connect with other kids. I discovered a Saturday morning comic book club at the library and a community center program called Adventure Buddies for children of single parents. Mason's teacher, Miss Reynolds, was incredibly supportive when I explained the situation during our parent-teacher conference that week. "Social rejection is particularly difficult for children Mason's age," she acknowledged. "But I've noticed him connecting with Jake Sullivan recently. They share an interest in science and comic books. Would you be open to me seating them together for our next project?" This intentional pairing proved transformative. Jake and Mason quickly became inseparable at school. 2 weeks after the birthday disaster, Jake's mother, Sarah, texted me, "Jake won't stop talking about Mason. Would he like to come over this Saturday to build the rocket kits? The boys have been designing." That first playdate extended into a regular weekend routine. Sarah and her husband Robert were warm, unpretentious people who seemed genuinely fond of Mason. They included him in family outings to the Science Museum and local baseball games. Gradually, I was included too, invited for barbecues and movie nights folded into their extended circle of friends, with an ease I'd never experienced in my own family. Mason began showing small signs of recovery. The withdrawn silence gave way to occasional bursts of enthusiasm, particularly around Jake. He started bringing home better grades and mentioned wanting to join the science club. Dr. Mitchell reported progress in their sessions, noting Mason's developing ability to distinguish between his worth and others' actions. Work became a surprising source of support as well. Brenda introduced me to other parents in the office, creating lunch conversations about the challenges and joys of raising children. My boss, Diane, invited Mason to join her son's basketball practice when she learned he'd been wanting to try the sport. Slowly, carefully, we were building something new, a chosen family assembled from genuine connections rather than obligatory blood ties. Exactly 1 week after the failed birthday party, as Mason and I were making Saturday morning pancakes, my phone buzzed with a text message. Seeing my mother's name on the screen after 7 days of silence sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I braced myself for a belated excuse, or perhaps even an apology. What I received instead would change the course of our family relationships forever. The message notification showed a preview. Important family event. Need your contribution. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest as I opened the full text. What appeared wasn't a message, but an elaborate digital invitation with animated glitter and flowing script. Rebecca's Sweet 18. Extravaganza, a night to remember. Below this headline was a description of an elaborate celebration at the Grand Windsor Hotel, one of the most expensive venues in the city, featuring a live band, gourmet catering, and a special surprise gift presentation. At the bottom, in my mother's unmistakable blunt style, family contribution expected $2,600 per person, Venmo to Patricia Mitchell by Friday. This is non-negotiable for family members. Rebecca deserves our full support for her transition to adulthood. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Not a single acknowledgement of missing Mason's birthday. Not even a cursory sorry we couldn't make it lie. Just a demand for an amount that represented more than a month's mortgage payment for an event celebrating my niece who, while pleasant enough on the rare occasions we saw her, was hardly close to either Mason or me. Dad, the pancakes are burning. Mason's voice snapped me back to reality. I quickly flipped the smoking pancake and set my phone face down on the counter, forcing a smile. Sorry, buddy. Got distracted. After breakfast, while Mason was upstairs playing, I sent a screenshot of the invitation to Marcus with the message, "Am I overreacting, or is this actually insane?" His response came quickly. Holy shit. No acknowledgement of missing Mason's birthday at all, and $2,600. That's not an invitation, it's extortion. My phone rang minutes later, my mother. I stepped onto the back porch to take the call, not wanting Mason to overhear. Did you get the invitation, she asked without preamble or greeting. Yes, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. Mom, it's been a week since Mason's birthday party that you and everyone else didn't show up for. He was devastated. A heavy sigh. Camden, you know how busy things get. Rebecca had college visits that weekend. These things happen. You couldn't have texted, called, sent a card, anything. I'm calling now about Rebecca's event, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. The venue requires final head count and payment by Monday. Will you be bringing Mason? I'll need to add him to your contribution amount. The casual dismissal of my son's heartbreak ignited something in me. You want me to pay over $5,000 for myself and Mason to attend a party for a niece who hasn't spoken to us in over a year, after you all completely ignored his 10th birthday. This is about family obligation, Camden, she said, her voice taking on the stern tone I remembered from childhood reprimands. Rebecca is entering a critical phase of her life. Amanda and Richard are doing everything possible to give her the send-off she deserves before college. Everyone is contributing. Mason was entering a critical phase too, double digits. After a year of being bullied at school, with no mother present in his life. But none of you could be bothered to show up for a 2-hour party with cake. That's different. Children have birthdays every year. And people only turn 18 once, I countered. Mom, this is crazy. I don't have that kind of money, and even if I did. Of course you do, she interrupted. You're a professional with a good job. You just need to prioritize family obligations. Amanda mentioned you remodeled your kitchen last year, so clearly you have disposable income. The remodel had been necessary repairs after a pipe burst, covered mostly by insurance with a high deductible that had strained our budget for months. I didn't bother correcting her assumption. I'll expect your Venmo by Friday, she concluded. Rebecca is counting on her whole family being there. Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood on the porch, phone in hand, vibrating with a rage so pure it momentarily robbed me of coherent thought. Throughout the day, messages arrived from other family members. Amanda sending details about the dress code, formal with specific color palette requirements. My aunt reminding me that family celebrations require sacrifice, and most plotted. Surprisingly, my brother-in-law Richard, who rarely communicated with me directly. Patricia mentioned you were hesitant about contributing to Rebecca's celebration. As you know, Amanda and I have always been generous with family events. We expect the same courtesy in return. The irony of this message from a man who had never once attended any event for Mason was so absurd. I actually laughed out loud, a short, harsh sound that held no humor. That evening, after Mason was asleep, I sat with my laptop open to my banking website, staring at the balance. We were stable but far from wealthy. The amount my mother demanded would wipe out most of our emergency fund money I'd painstakingly saved to provide security for Mason. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity about my place in this family dynamic, and a sudden, unshakable certainty about what needed to happen next. I opened the Venmo app and navigated to my mother's account. In the amount field, I typed 1. In the notes section, I wrote simply, "Congratulations." The petty defiance felt simultaneously childish and deeply satisfying. But I knew this small act of rebellion would unleash a storm, and I needed to prepare. The following morning, I called a locksmith and had all the exterior locks changed. My mother had an emergency key she'd demanded years ago during a phase of health anxiety. I'd never been comfortable with it but had acquiesced to keep peace. Next, I blocked my mother's number, my sister's number, and those of the extended family members who had participated in the text barrage. I sent a final message to Marcus, going dark with family for a while. Call if you need me. Then I took Mason for ice cream and focused entirely on rebuilding his sense of security and joy, one small moment at a time. The response to my $1 Venmo and subsequent cutting of communication channels was swift and furious. Within hours, my email inbox filled with messages from unfamiliar addresses, cousins. I barely spoke to family friends I hadn't seen in years. Even my mother's bridge club members, all expressing variations of outrage about my Point family friends. Disrespect and selfishness. Most messages referenced how my actions were hurting Rebecca, though I doubted my 18-year-old niece was particularly invested in my attendance at her elaborate party. More likely, the absence of my contribution was the actual concern. Following Marcus's advice, I didn't respond to any messages but saved them all to a dedicated folder. Document everything he'd texted when I called to give him an update. If they escalate further, you might need evidence of harassment. I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but Monday morning proved Marcus's caution warranted. I arrived at work to find my mother sitting in the reception area, her posture rigid, handbag clutched tightly in her lap. My stomach dropped at the sight of her. This was a line she'd never crossed before bringing family drama into my professional space. "Camden," she said loudly as I walked through the door, drawing the attention of the receptionist and several colleagues passing through the lobby. "We need to talk about your behavior." I kept my voice low. "This is my workplace. I'm not having this conversation here." "You've left me no choice," she replied, her voice carrying. "You've blocked my calls and changed your locks after sending that insulting Venmo. What kind of son treats his mother this way?" People were openly staring now. I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment and anger. Mom, please. This isn't appropriate. What's not appropriate is abandoning your family obligations, she continued, standing now. Rebecca is devastated that her uncle is refusing to attend her celebration. A complete fabrication. Rebecca likely didn't even know about the Venmo transaction, but the public setting made it impossible to call out the lie without creating an even bigger scene. Before I could respond, Brenda appeared beside me, assessing the situation with a quick glance. "Patricia Wright, Camden's mother," she said pleasantly, extending her hand. "I'm Brenda Jenkins, project manager. We have an unexpected client meeting starting in 5 minutes that requires Camden's immediate attention. Perhaps you could schedule a time to speak with him after work hours." My mother looked momentarily flustered by the professional interruption. "This is a family matter." "Of course," Brenda said smoothly. "And I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries between personal and professional spaces. Our reception staff would be happy to help you schedule a proper appointment." With the gentle but firm dismissal, Brenda guided me toward the elevators, leaving my mother standing in the lobby. Once the elevator doors closed, I released a shaky breath. "Thank you," I managed. "That was unexpected." Brenda squeezed my shoulder briefly. "Family can be the worst sometimes. Take a few minutes to compose yourself, then join us in the conference room. We really do have a client meeting, but I can cover the first 10 minutes. The workday proceeded without further incident, though I felt a constant undercurrent of anxiety. I called Mason's school during my lunch break to update his emergency contacts, removing my mother and sister from the approved pickup list. That evening, Mason and I were finishing dinner when headlights swept across our front windows. A car had pulled into our driveway. "Is that Uncle Marcus Mason?" asked, peering toward the window. Before I could answer, pounding on the front door echoed through the house. Mason's eyes widened with alarm. Through the peephole, I saw my mother and sister standing on the porch, expressions tight with anger. I gestured for Mason to stay in the kitchen and opened the door without unlocking the security chain. "Camden, this is ridiculous," Amanda snapped. "Let us in. We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to either of you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Please leave." My mother pushed forward. "We're family. You can't just cut us off because you're having a tantrum over a party contribution." "This isn't about the money," I said. "It's about years of you treating Mason like an afterthought. It's about none of you showing up for his birthday after promising you would. It's about demanding thousands of dollars for Rebecca without even acknowledging how you hurt my son." "Children are resilient," my mother dismissed. "Mason needs to learn that disappointment is part of life. Not when it's deliberately inflicted by people who are supposed to love him," I countered. "Now please leave or I'll call the police." Amanda's face twisted with indignation. "You'd call the police on your own mother. What kind of example does that set for Mason?" "A good one," I replied without hesitation. "It shows him that everyone deserves respect, even 10-year-old boys, and that it's important to set boundaries with people who repeatedly hurt you, even if they're family." "If you don't let us in," my mother said, her voice lowering dangerously, "there will be consequences. I'm concerned about Mason's well-being living with someone so unstable. Perhaps Child Protective Services should evaluate your fitness as a parent." The threat sent ice through my veins. Though I knew it was baseless, I was a dedicated, consistent parent with a stable home and income. The mere suggestion of someone questioning my custody of Mason terrified me. "You're threatening me because I wouldn't give you money," I said, making sure my phone was recording in my pocket. "That says everything about why I'm keeping Mason away from you." I closed the door firmly and engaged the deadbolt, then returned to the kitchen where Mason sat wide-eyed at the table. "Was that Grandma?" he asked quietly. "Is she mad at us?" I sat beside him, choosing my words carefully. "Grandma and I are having a disagreement about some grown-up things. It has nothing to do with you, and you didn't do anything wrong." "I heard her say something about me," he persisted. "Sometimes when adults get upset, they say things they shouldn't," I explained. "But my job is to make sure you're safe and happy, and sometimes that means making tough decisions about who we spend time with." Mason considered this, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Are we not going to see Grandma anymore? I pulled him into a gentle hug. For now, we're taking a break from seeing Grandma and Aunt Amanda. We need some time to figure things out. That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying my mother's threat and researching family attorneys on my phone. Though I believed her CPS threat was likely empty, I couldn't risk being unprepared. Mason was everything to me. 2 days after my $1 Venmo payment, the confrontation I'd been bracing for arrived in an unexpected form. I was working at my home office while Mason attended his after-school program when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed police officers standing on my porch. My heart hammered as I opened the door. "Can I help you, officers?" Camden Mitchell, the taller officer, asked. His nameplate read Reynolds. "Yes, that's me. I'm Officer Reynolds, this is Officer Patel. We've received a complaint about a possible domestic disturbance at this address. A concerned family member reported shouting and potentially unsafe conditions. The fabricated concern was so transparent, I would have laughed if the situation weren't so serious. That's completely false," I said calmly. "May I ask which family member made this report?" Officer Reynolds consulted his notepad. "A Patricia Mitchell called it in. She identified herself as your mother and said she's concerned about her grandson's welfare." I took a deep breath. "Officers, I'd like to show you something if that's all right." I invited them inside and provided documentation of the recent events, to screenshots of the birthday party invitations, sent to family photos of the empty party venue, the outrageous $2,600 demand, and finally recordings of my mother and sister's threats on my porch. Officer Reynolds reviewed everything carefully, his expression growing increasingly skeptical of the complaint. "So, this appears to be retaliation for not providing money for another family event." "Yes," I confirmed. "My son is currently at his after-school program where he goes every day. He's well cared for, excelling in school, and sees a therapist regularly to help with some social challenges. I can provide his doctor's contact information if needed." Officer Patel nodded, making notes. "That won't be necessary. This appears to be a family dispute rather than a welfare concern. We see this kind of thing more often than you'd think." Officer Reynolds added, his tone softening. "Family members weaponizing welfare checks or police calls during disputes. I'd recommend documenting everything and considering a restraining order if the harassment continues." After the officers left, I sank onto the couch, shaking with delayed reaction to the encounter. The escalation to involving police represented a crossing of boundaries I couldn't ignore. I called Marcus, who arrived 30 minutes later with takeout food and practical advice. "You need legal help," he said firmly. "This isn't something you should navigate alone." He was right. The time for hoping my family would recognize their harmful behavior had passed. Now I needed to protect Mason and myself with every legal tool available. The morning after the police visit, I contacted Timothy Bennett, a family law attorney recommended by one of Brenda's friends. I explained the situation as clinically as possible, providing the documentation I'd gathered and emphasizing my primary concern: protecting Mason from both emotional harm and any potential custody challenges, however baseless. "From what you've described, you have nothing to worry about regarding custody," Timothy assured me after reviewing the evidence. "You're clearly a dedicated parent providing a stable, loving home. However, the harassment is concerning, and we should address it proactively." On his advice, I filed for a temporary restraining order against my mother and sister, citing the escalating pattern of harassment culminating in the false police report. The documentation was thorough: texts, emails, recordings, and statements from witnesses like Brenda, who had observed my mother's workplace ambush. The judge granted the temporary order, scheduling a hearing for the permanent order in 3 weeks. The legal process was stressful, but necessary, providing an official barrier between my toxic family members and the peaceful life I was trying to rebuild with Mason. With this protection in place, I focused entirely on strengthening the positive relationships we were developing. Jake and his parents, Sarah and Robert, became regular fixtures in our lives. Sunday dinners at their home evolved into a weekly tradition, expanding to include other families from the boys' school and creating an informal support network. Brenda and her husband invited us to their lake cabin for a weekend where Mason caught his first fish and beamed with pride in the photo I framed for his bedroom. Marcus organized a neighborhood basketball game that became a monthly event gathering kids and parents from surrounding blocks for pizza and friendly competition afterward. Slowly, deliberately, we were creating our chosen family people who showed up consistently, who valued Mason for exactly who he was, who demonstrated that love wasn't conditional on performance or financial contributions. Dr. Mitchell continued working with Mason weekly, helping him process the complex emotions surrounding family rejection and building resilience against future disappointments. During one of our parent consultation sessions, he offered an observation that resonated deeply. Mason is actually handling this better than many children, Woody noted. He's developing a healthy understanding that sometimes the problem lies with others, not with him. That's a crucial life skill many adults never master. At work, my focus improved as the family drama receded. Diane recognized my dedication with a promotion to lead designer, bringing a welcome increase in both responsibility and salary. The additional income allowed for small improvements to our home, and the occasional special experience for Mason, like the astronomy night camp he'd been talking about for months. As summer approached, I worked with Sarah and Robert to plan something special. On a warm Saturday in June, exactly 1 month after the failed birthday party, we held a half-birthday celebration for Mason at the local park. Jake invited friends from their class. The basketball kids came with their families, and colleagues from work brought their children. The gathering was simple: grilled hot dogs, a homemade cake, lawn games, and a water balloon fight that left everyone soaking and laughing. No elaborate decorations or expensive venue, just genuine people who cared about Mason. Watching him surrounded by friends, his face alight with unguarded joy as he tried to dodge water balloons, I felt something inside me heal. This was what celebration should be: authentic connection, rather than obligation or performance. The court hearing for the permanent restraining order arrived, and to my surprise, neither my mother nor sister appeared to contest it. The judge reviewed the evidence and granted a 1-year order extendable if the harassment continued. As we approached the 1-year mark since that devastating empty birthday party, the changes in our lives were profound. Mason had blossomed, socially developing close friendships beyond just Jake, and finding his place in the science club, where his meticulous attention to detail was valued rather than mocked. I had been promoted again, now managing a small team of designers, with the flexibility to maintain my work-from-home schedule. Our financial situation had stabilized enough to begin a modest college fund for Mason and plan a summer road trip to visit several national parks, an adventure he'd been researching for weeks. Most importantly, the dark cloud of family obligation and perpetual disappointment had lifted. We hadn't heard from my mother or sister since the restraining order was granted, and the absence of their toxic presence allowed us both to breathe more freely. On a quiet evening, as Mason and I worked on a model rocket kit at the kitchen table, a level of focus and patience he wouldn't have had. A year ago, he looked up suddenly with an expression of serious contemplation. "Dad, remember last year when nobody came to my birthday, and I made that wish when I blew out my candle?" My hand stilled on the tiny parts I was assembling. "I remember. I wished for a real family," he said, his eyes meeting mine steadily. "Not just people who are related to us, but people who actually want to be around us and care about us." My throat tightened. "And what do you think? Did you get your wish?" Mason looked around our kitchen at the refrigerator covered with artwork and photos from outings with our new friends, at the calendar marked with basketball games and science club meetings and Sunday dinners at Jake's house. "Yeah," he said with quiet certainty. "I think I got something even better than what I wished for. I got to see that you were right." "Right about what?" "About how sometimes the people who are supposed to love you don't know how, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you." He returned to carefully painting the rocket fin. And sometimes you have to build your own family with people who know how to love properly. In that moment, I realized that the painful journey we'd endured had given my son something invaluable: the wisdom to recognize genuine connection, the courage to release toxic relationships, and the confidence to create his own definition of family. The cycle of conditional love and emotional neglect that had shaped my childhood had been broken. Mason would carry forward a different legacy, one of authenticity, resilience, and the knowledge that family is defined by actions rather than blood. As we finished the model rocket and set it aside to dry, I made a silent vow to continue nurturing this hard-won wisdom in both of us. The path forward wasn't about forgetting the past or harboring resentment, but about choosing consciously who deserved space in our lives, and recognizing that sometimes the greatest act of love is establishing boundaries that protect your joy. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about family relationships to protect yourself or your children? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. We're building a community here of people who understand that sometimes the most important family is the one you choose. Thank you for listening to our journey, and remember, you deserve people in your life who show up for you, not just when it's convenient, but especially when it matters most.